Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. Deadline day has passed and Nottingham Forest know their squad for the rest of the season. So we're here to take stock with a transfer window debrief. We'll talk the deals that did happen, the ones that didn't, interest in Murillo, and a potential new contract for Nuno in the company of BBC Radio Nottingham's football presenter, David Jackson. David, good to have you back with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Good to be here. Good to be here when it's not off the back of a heavy defeat as well. That's always nice, Matt, which is rare, as we know. It's good to be here after what I think will ultimately have to be classed as a decent window.
Do you know, you or Colin were in my thoughts to ask to do the Wednesday interview after the Bournemouth game, and I didn't do it. So it sort of feels like it breaks the curse.
As soon as you think about asking me, you know they're going to get heavily beaten that weekend. So I'm out. I dread the text message. So good to have it when there's no game coming up this weekend. So I know that it's going to be okay.
Well, you're on off the back of a 7-0 win, which we might touch on, but we are mostly here to talk transfers. Like I say, we'll get into specific deals a little bit. The main talking point, I guess, is actually the one that didn't happen. Everyone really wanted a forward. I think the club did as well. They pushed hard for Johan Visser by all indications. It didn't happen. We did make a youth signing, which we'll get into, but that 1 point seems to have formed two schools of thought around the whole window. On one hand, people are feeling it was almost exclusively successful because we got new contracts for Murillo and Chris Wood, and no one was sold. On the other hand, people are feeling it was a failure to at least some extent because we didn't strengthen. Where do you sit on those two camps, do you think?
Well, I mean, look, we've had January windows before where Forest have signed strikers and it's not gone particularly well, has it? You think back to Forest making a late signing of Divock Origi. You go further back, you think of McCormack signing on deadline day. Those signings haven't worked, over the years. Look, I think Visser would have been a terrific signing. I think you'd have to say that would have been low risk. I think he would have fitted in brilliantly with what Forest are doing, and I think that just shows they're going for the right kind of players. They're in a difficult position at the moment because they're in a position where, in order to improve on what they've got, the amount of money they would need to spend, perhaps they haven't even got if they're going to comply with PSR, and secondly, if they are going to spend that amount of money and they've got it, which are two big assumptions, who are they competing with for those players? The rumours, however true or not, they were about interest in Matheus Cunha. Even if they had all the money that it would take to get Matheus Cunha out, inevitably they're going to have to be competing with Arsenal for that kind of a player. And that's really difficult because is a player with a choice of those two clubs, a club who've been top four for years and established in that sense and probably able to offer more money and things there? Or do you join Forest, who, yes, are on the rise, but you're having to buy into something there? So I think it becomes difficult for Forest to be able to, at the moment, in January, to sign the calibre of player that they would need to improve what they already have. I think that is more likely to be able to happen once we know what is going to be happening next season, which European competition, assuming there is one, they're going to be in next season. Then I think it's going to be easier to work out, okay, what kind of player are they able to sign?
Yeah, if you look at the clubs around us as well, I mean, Spurs aren't around us, but they made a big signing from Bayern Munich in Intel. But more specifically, Villa and City, I guess. City spent a ton of money. I think they spent 250 million quid, certainly over 200 million.
Yep.
Villa signed Asensio and Rashford. And they're the sort of signings that you probably make in January a lot of times, sort of a punt, a gamble. And we did it to a degree in last January with Sells and Reina, because they weren't surefire hits. They cost a lot less money, though, than Marcus Rashford's wages and Marcos Asensio. So I guess, is the feeling the summer window's the one? And that's the big window that we're going to have to nail when we go forwards.
Yeah. Don't forget, Villa also sold John Duran for, tens of millions of pounds. So, they also had a lot of money coming in. Would you have wanted Forest to sell one of their crown jewels in order to then go and spend a load of money on a striker? I'm not sure what the point would be, because you're just upsetting what Forest have already got, which is this brilliantly tight-knit team that's playing so well, and would you want to just upset that by taking somebody out for 50 million just to sign somebody else for 50 million in another position to add cover for? I don't think you would really. I think if they were able to get Wissa, and that would have fitted in, financially with their plans and with PSR and everything else, I think that would have been a really good signing. I think it would have been a great signing, but I'm not sure how many of those players at that caliber, at that price, at that potential availability there are, especially in January. So I think the summer is the one for that kind of signing from a Forest perspective. And I think most important is genuinely doing deals for Wood, doing deals for Murillo, holding off any interest in those players so that they can carry on what they've got at the moment to the end of the season and then go, right, are they going to be in the Champions League next season? If they are, then who wants to come and sign for a Champions League club? If they're going to be Europa League, okay, who's going to sign for a Europa League club? And then you can start to work that out. At the moment in January, that's really tough. And it would have been damaging if they'd have lost one of their top players, even if they'd, reinvested the money somewhere else. You're then wondering how that's going to affect the team in two ways. One, losing one of your better players, and two, in bringing another player in. So that's potentially damaging in two ways. I think coming out of the window as it is, and yes, they haven't spent loads and loads of money on the big money striker, and people always want to see a big money striker come in. It's exciting, right? Of course it is. That's what we always want. It's exciting. But instead, what they've done is what sensibly you'd want them to do, really, which is spend considerably less on a couple of young players for the future. Look back and think Danilo. I know they spent 50 million on him. He was a January signing. Took a little while, but now you and I know he's had an injury and everything, but you're seeing a player who's now established as a first team squad kind of player. So maybe Tyler Binden will become that. Obviously, he's going to stay on loan at Reading for the rest of this season, but they're investing in young players with a mind to the future rather than panicking at the last minute and throwing 50, 60 million pounds around for a player. And, the amount of times we've seen over the years, right at the end, when you think they're done on deadline day, suddenly another player or two comes in and you think, well, what's going on here? How are these players going to fit it? We haven't got that this year. And they don't need it this year. They're doing really well. Yes, they had a blip at Bournemouth. Look how they recovered. They're fine. They're okay. They're good. They're a really good team at the moment. They're a tight-knit, good team with a great team spirit, fantastic balance. They're scoring goals. They're enjoying themselves. They're playing without fear. I'm glad they've not done anything silly to risk disrupting that.
I suppose the counter narrative to the people we sitting here now saying, well, why didn't we at least go out and get an Evan Ferguson on loan? Because we're exposed now with Taiwo and Chris Wood. Do you see merit in that, or is that sort of a square peg in a round hole type solution, a Rodrigo Ribeiro type situation in a way?
Well, it could potentially be. I mean, we'll see how Ferguson ends up doing now that he's actually got out on loan for the remainder of this season, and we'll see how he does. But I guess maybe from Nuno's point of view, he's looking at it thinking, well, am I going to bring in a player on loan who is not going to go straight into my team and might not play for a few months? Is that what good's that going to do? I'm going to potentially have an unhappy player around that can't get into my team. And if he decides he doesn't want that, what he's got at the moment is players who, even when they're not playing, are happy. You look at Taiwo, one of the contribution that he made, came off the bench. I thought, it almost scored. It led to a goal, ultimately, of course. You look at other players like Moreno, for me, at the weekend. That was one of the highlights, one of the things that I really noticed at the end of the game. He's over orchestrating the A block into songs, dancing on the pitch. He's not started a Premier League game since the Manchester City game. He's come off the bench a couple of times, but he's played in the FA Cup. But he's a lone player. He's a lone player who's not playing. And while some of the players are out walking around the pitch, he's standing there, kind of orchestrating the fantasy in the A block into chance. And I just thought that's what Forest have got at the moment. So the question is, would that be a risk? Forget footballing things for a moment. From Nuno's point of view, it's a balancing act with the spirit of the squad that he's got. And do you want to add somebody in who potentially is not going to be happy coming in and playing a bit part role or not much more? And that's his call. That's what he's got to do. Now, of course, if Chris Wood gets an injury and Taiwo Awoniyi gets an injury, then of course Nuno will have to answer questions of well, the club will have to answer questions. Well, why didn't you sign a striker in January? You obviously should have done. But that's the balancing act. That's what being a manager is all about. Being in recruitment is all about. Nuno likes a small squad. We know that. That's what he's got. He must think that he's got enough. Maybe you could put Elanga up there. Maybe you can play a false nine, and maybe he'd be happy doing that if the worst comes to the worst and he ends up losing his two strikers. But I think that's probably more the risk. Are you just going to bring in a player who's not going to be happy with the amount of football that Nuno might be able to offer him?
Yeah, I mean, there is an element of risk, but I think all indications are, as you say, that Nuno wanted this and wanted it in the summer, and it's worked out well, and he likes that small squad. And one other point on this before we move on, I think it was Pete Blackburn last night was saying he thinks we make too much of this Taiwo and Chris Wood situation. He said about the difference between Carlos Miguel and Matt Sells is pretty big as far as we know. Jota and Sosa are somewhat behind Hudson-Odoi and Elanga, and we're not really screaming about that. Is it just because it's the striker and it's the most prized position on the pitch? You think that we make so much of it, and are we making too much of this situation?
Well, that's probably the reason why that's the one that fans talk about. I mean, if Matt Sells gets injured, and Sells has been phenomenally good this year. Let's not forget. I mean, he's got more clean sheets than anybody else in the Premier League. So of course, there's a gap between what Sells is and where any other goalkeeper would be. Who's sitting on the bench. And Carlos Miguel hasn't had that many games, so yeah, he'd have to come in and fill in. And would he be as good as Sells? I mean, we don't know, but it would be a big ask. Likewise, as you say, if Hudson-Odoi and Elanga are out injured and you've got two different wingers, then you might say, well, they're not as potent up front, but you can't just go out and find another Anthony Elanga to sit on the bench and wait for him to get injured to go in. And yeah, maybe the same thing can be said for the strikers. That's what I'm saying. It would be a risk to bring in a striker who you're saying, well, look, you're going to be second or third choice and I'm only going to play one striker. Well, that's not a very attractive option for a lone player, is it? A lone player, where he's not playing that much, wants to get out and play football. Forest can't really offer that at the moment because they've got an incredibly prolific striker who's putting away a higher percentage of chances than basically any player has before in the Premier League. Has scored 17 goals already by this stage. Of course, a lone player like Evan Ferguson isn't going to arrive and just get straight into the team. So maybe too much is made of it. I mean, we'll see. Like I say, if we end up with those two getting injured, then that point will be validated, won't it? People will then say, well, we told you so. We needed another striker in at that point. Yeah, of course. If they don't, then Nuno's validated and the club are validated because they say, well, the small squad has worked and that's what we wanted and that's kept this unity and we haven't got a miserable footballer sitting around who's not playing. That's the balance. That's the risk. I think at the moment, Chris Wood's just absolutely flying and it's not like we're looking at it saying, if they were playing Champions League at the moment, playing so many more games, you might say, well, we don't want him playing absolutely every game. We need someone else in the team as well. You're going to need more depth if you've got a European campaign going side by side with the Premier League. But they haven't. So, in those terms, they're okay. It's just in case they get an injury.
We'll get into some specific names next, and there were some interesting ones done, and we'll get into the players who left as well. Just before that, a word for the Trent Navigation. Loads of stuff coming up. Nationally acclaimed 6-piece funk and soul covers band Urban Intro will be at the Big Shed for their funk and soul cookout on Friday the 25th of April. Doors are at 6 p.m. and tickets include food from the Soul Food Court and the Big Shed Pizza Kitchen. DJ support from DJ Good Times DJ Jez Prince. You can tell I'm well up on him. Visit gigantic.com for tickets. It's £22 including fees and food. There's a QR code on the screen if you're watching, but if you just search gigantic.com if you're listening. I'm so good at these ad reads, David. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
I just sat in awe. That was fantastic.
I especially really enjoy doing them when there's a professional presenter on the other side of the screen as well. That makes it even more
well,
fun.
A presenter anyway, but yes, thank you.
Certainly much more qualified than me, much better. Right, deals that were done then. We did sign Tyler Bindon from Reading, New Zealand international central defender who's 20 and got 13 caps. Joel Ndala joined on loan from Man City with a view to a £4 million summer move after a stint in PSV Eindhoven's second team was cancelled. He's 18, I think. Interestingly, Ndala's loan was announced via the academy Twitter account, not the senior Twitter account, which I imagine is a deliberate thing, just not to raise too many expectations. But just in principle on those two deals, David, looking to the future, we were lauding it last night on the podcast. I certainly like it. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think when Fabrizio Romano tweeted that last night, sort of made
a gift from Marinakis. It really built it up, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas actually, here's a guy who, from what I gather, was kind of ripping it up as a kid a couple of years ago. Obviously, City kind of let him go out then to PSV, but Forest obviously sees something there in a young lad who maybe just needs a fresh start somewhere, get out, get to Forest and move, and obviously think, okay, if we could make this permanent, a few million quid, and there's a worthwhile investment for however long, who knows? Sometimes players at teenage can get into the first team. Maybe it'll be longer than that, don't know. But yes, I certainly like those terms of investment in that area. It doesn't surprise me that they've moved for a forward at that age, because actually, if you look at the Forest under 21s, the B team, if you like, at the moment, they're bereft of strikers because they've all gone out on loan. They've often been playing with a false 10 with Joe Gardner in that position, and now even he's gone out on loan, obviously. And I'm really pleased for him, by the way, because he's been brilliant for the B team. So to see him go out and get some first team football at Lincoln will be brilliant. So purely in terms of how the B team operate, they've kind of needed a forward in there. So he'll probably go into that area, I guess, and play there. And yeah, one for the future. Great. As for Tyler Bindon, somebody who's been playing well in the Championship by all accounts, good passer of the ball, good in one-on-one duels, good long passes as well. Scored an overhead kick from close range, but scored an overhead kick against Mansfield, I remember, in the not too distant past this season. So look, I like it. I like it, he's a 20-year-old Forester now in that position in the Premier League where they're able to do what we always found annoying when Forest were in the Championship, which is just kind of look through the Championship and go, right, who do we want? Right, we'll have here a few million quid, low risk. We'll have here, we'll see him develop for the next 6 months, year, and we'll see how he goes. And maybe he could get in and be a part of that first team squad. So yeah, I like it a lot. Like I said, what Forest aren't in a position necessarily to do this window was spend tens of millions of pounds on the sort of quality players that it would take to replace the current first team players. So what they have done instead is do what I think we want to see them doing, which is invest in some good quality youngsters who in a year's time might become those first team players. I'm the same as you. I like it very much. It might not be the most headline grabbing signings from a national point of view, but who knows, in a year or two's time, we might look back at this window and go, blimey, that was a good January.
I think so. I mean, there's no guarantee they come off. Like I was looking at Nelson Abbey earlier, who signed from Reading for Olympiacos, and he's kind of stagnated a bit. He's at Rio Ave after an unsuccessful loan spell at Swansea. But even if it doesn't come off, I don't know what Tyler Bindon cost. 500,000, $1 million, something like that. And 4 million's nothing really for a talented young winger. So yeah, and I hope, like David said as well, that the academy, it feels like it's just catching fire a little bit, hopefully. Gardner's looks like a great prospect. Have you seen much of Gardner? I've got high hopes for him, having seen about one game and 20 minutes of academy footage. Have you seen more of him?
I've seen a bit more of him, yeah. I really like him. He's got good feet, and quick feet as well. And he's got a bit of height. He's got a bit of strength to him. Can pass it. When I've seen him play, like I say, he'd end up having to play in this sort of false nine. And when I've seen him, I kind of thought, I wish I could see him just playing as a 10 with a striker. I'd like to see him do that. But Forest have let their forwards go out on loan, like a Sapper or so on, players like that have gone out on loan to get their football, and fair enough. But it's left the B team without a sort of recognised striker, if you like. So I like him a lot. Whenever I've seen the B team play, it's not obviously been every game by any stretch of the imagination, but he's always been my standout player. So I think, he's absolutely got a good future ahead of him. And I'm glad to see him going out and getting some football at Lincoln. As we know, when Forest send young players out to Lincoln, it can work out well.
Certainly can. Obviously with Brennan, and Morgan Rogers as well was with Brennan at the same time. So let's hope for more of that. We'll get on to, there was an interesting article by John Percy around the transfer window. We'll discuss some key points on that, just in terms of the outgoings before we get to that. James Ward-Prowse went back to West Ham. Liam O'Brien. I've wanted to call him Liam O'Brien for about 4 years, which shows how much he's played. Lewis O'Brien went to Swansea. Emmanuel Dennis went to Blackburn. And after we finished recording last night, Finn Back joined Wickham on a permanent loan. So good luck to him, because I think he's one of those unfortunate players who, if we'd been in the Championship, probably might well have made it. But going up to the Premier League and a couple of injuries have set him back. Just on general in those departures then, it's some good housekeeping, I think, isn't it? I mean, Ward-Prowse has been a bit unlucky. He was on a lot of money by the sound of it. So that one made sense, do you think?
Yeah, it completely made sense. You can understand with Potter going in at West Ham that he'd want to get him back there and take a look at him. It was always the feeling, I think, when they signed him and it was on loan, I kind of thought, we'll see how Lopetegui does there, because if he has gone by then, which is obviously what's happened, then a new manager may want to take him back anyway, and that's what's happened. And also, Forest have got Danilo back, and Sangare is back and available again. And there's, as a football club, you're unlikely, I think, to put Ward-Prowse into that team when you've got a young up and coming player who's on your own books in Danilo, and you've got Sangare who spent £30 million on. They are just naturally, it's just good football sense, a good business sense, that they become the priority over James Ward-Prowse. So he's not needed. I think he's done okay. I mean, he's a tidy footballer. I don't think we've seen the full range of what he can do. We haven't had the full benefit of those set pieces. I remember one at Chelsea that he put right on Milenkovic's head that Chris Wood then put in. But, you look at Elanga's set pieces now, and they're not in dire need of having somebody to take those anymore. So West Ham want him back. Can't blame them. I hope he goes and does well. By all accounts, a very professional player, great attitude, and good luck to him for the rest of the season, really. But it didn't surprise me in any way that loan came to an end.
Just on the other ones who went, I suppose there's this little clutch of players, aren't there? Like Dennis, O'Brien. I'd throw Matt Turner in there as well, of kind of the cast-offs from the old recruitment regime, and we'll get onto the new one a little bit. It's just a case of trying to get them off the books as much as you can. Even if it's on loan and your clubs are paying, I don't know what, I bet Blackburn are paying a very small percentage of his wages, but it's probably good for all parties, isn't it?
Yeah, well, with Dennis, if he gets there and he gets some football, then that's him in the window, isn't it? If he can go and score a few goals in the Championship, then great. That absolutely suits everybody, because he isn't realistically going to get near that Forest first team at the moment, because, as you say, they've kind of moved on from that, and they're now a team that are looking for players who can potentially play in Europe for them next season. And I don't think, by the fact that he's not been in the 25, Nuno doesn't see Emmanuel Dennis as that. So, I think that's, again, a bit of a no-brainer. If somebody's been prepared to take him and he's been happy to go, and there's an opportunity for him to potentially play some games, then absolutely that strikes me as another kind of good deal for all concerned, really, because what's the point in him being around and not being part of the 25? It's a bit of a waste of everybody's time, really.
I mentioned the change in approach there, which leads into the article that John Percy wrote today in the Telegraph. They're talking about the whole window and the picture around it, and I suppose the recurring theme is retaining our players. He mentioned potential interest in Elanga. Said Chelsea had bid for Murillo, and then they got the new contract signed for him. And there's a recognition of the PSR picture. The way John had written it sounds a little tight in January. And as we said earlier, we'll review it in the summer. But there's been a big shift in the recruitment policy, hasn't there? It feels to me a lot more joined up. And if we can ward off interest from Chelsea, it feels like we're a club. Everything's moving in the right direction for me.
Yeah, I mean, it has felt at times a bit scattergun, hasn't it? From when Forest went up, just the sheer amount of signings they made. But at the same time, it was kind of necessary. There's no point just going over old ground and explaining why. We all know, don't we, why it was so necessary that Forest made so many signings in that first window and the second as well. And, if some didn't come off, fine. I think some of them were perhaps signed at that time with potential relegation in mind, thinking, well, look, if we sign these players and send them out on loan, if we end up back down in the Championship, they'll be really useful players for us. And in the meantime, if they work in the Premier League, great, but they might be really handy for us in the Championship. So I think if you look at the signings made in that summer, I think at the back of Forest's mind, there was a few signings there that were with potential relegation in mind. That's now not a concern this season. So they're now having to sort of look up at a different quality. One thing I did enjoy particularly was the social media release for Lewis O'Brien's signing. Did you see?
Yeah,
did you see that? The life of Brian, the life O'Brien, the life of O'Brien. Yes. I liked that very much. If you've ever seen that Monty Python film, then that scene was very well done. There's been a few, I think, this January that have been.
Well, Burnley
did a very good one. Yeah, with the friends, the friends, Ross and Rachel phone call at the end. I liked that very much. It's been quite good to see the return of quite comedy signing releases. I don't mind that.
There's been fewer signings. I guess it gives club media a bit more time, but that's the thing. There has been fewer signings. There's been fewer big signs. I mean, the days of Andy Carroll and Fernando Torres going for 80 million quid and all that stuff. I think Man City bucks the trend because they had to, but it's an evolving transfer window, probably worldwide, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, and I think from English clubs' point of view, I think they've seen clubs be punished for PSR as well, and I think it's kind of perhaps made them a little bit nervous because if you suddenly have a few points deducted like Forest and Everton have, then I think you look at that and go, well, actually we're going to have to manage this and be a little bit more careful. And yeah, you're right. Man City have spent a load. I mean, Manchester United's window was a bit odd, wasn't it? Really, because they've kind of ended up.
We signed one left back or something like that.
Weaker than they were at the start. Certainly in attacking terms, they've lost Rashford and not. That's been quite bizarre. But you can see why. I guess from a national point of view, that's the case. I thought it's interesting that, say, with John Duran going to Saudi, and also that bid for Mitoma coming in, huge bid for Mitoma. I wonder when we'll see that market become a genuinely sort of bigger player for that kind of player, rather than just the players at the back end of their careers. I wondered if that might really kind of kickstart this month, but apart from Duran and the bid for Mitoma, there's not been loads in terms of players who are actually at their peak moving out there, and that might change the market in some way. But it hasn't quite yet. And I'm kind of I'm quite happy for it to be quieter, and the summer will be really interesting. The summer from Forest, and obviously, is entirely dictated by where they finish this year. They'll get a shed load more money. What is it, 3 million a position roughly? How high you are at the table. So there's more money coming in than they would have perhaps accounted for anyway this year, assuming they can stay somewhere where they are. And then there's European football next year, but the gulf between Champions League next year and Conference League next year is massive in terms of your budget. So who are they going to be able to sign? What are they going to be able to do? I don't know. But it's just, at least they're in a position where they weren't thinking, we're going to have to sell Murillo. And that's fantastic news, because that would have potentially derailed things this month if a top player so central to them had gone. Instead, him signing a new contract, I think, has just made everybody think, we're at a club that not only is deserves to be where it is in the table, but actually has ambitions of going beyond this.
I do wonder if the plan in the summer was when we were bidding for Marmoush and Jimenez and Nketiah and all those players. We'll sign one of those now and we'll sell a big name in January to cover the books, or we'll sell someone in June. We'll sell an Elanga at the start of June, like we did with Niakate and Mangala. And actually, when you get to January, you don't want to sell any of your prized assets, do you? Because they're now worth so much more. So I think that might have been a factor.
Well, the other thing is, if say Forest were 13th in the table this month, and then you'd got Chelsea interested in Murillo because Chelsea are pushing to try and ensure their place in the Champions League, and you think, well, how much money would they be prepared to pay in order to get the defender that they wanted that might give them that extra little lift? You're talking, tens and tens of millions of pounds. The talk from John Percy, as you say, was a club record, so over 50 million, 60, 70. Say they kind of go, well, do you know what, we'll push it up to 80 million. And Forest at that point, if they were mid-table now, would be thinking, well, how much are we going to get in the summer? Is it worth just selling now and sign a player or two that we want now, or we'll just spend this money in January or whatever? But instead, Forest are third. So the drop is too costly for them. That money, well, it'll still be worth that in the summer. It's not worth Forest taking that gamble and selling him this month to a Champions League rival as they are this season. So I think that's another factor where Forest are in the table at the moment allows them to just say, no, it's actually not worth it for us to sell.
Yeah, and I wondered if we'd go in for like a João Felix, or I see Chelsea were loaning players out. They didn't want to loan to Premier League, Champions League rivals as well. That was another factor. I think there's so many factors that go into it. While you were talking, there was a tangent actually in your previous answer I was thinking of. Why would you not take that Mitoma money from Saudi Arabia? I was shocked by that. If you're 9th, 10th, going nowhere in the table, it's a bit odd to me.
I think he didn't want to go.
Okay.
That's the other factor. And I think that's always going to be the factor if you're asking to go to a less competitive league. The money might be available and you'd get a great big payday, and fair play to you if that's what you want to do. But if the player doesn't want to go, but I agree, it's an incredible amount of money that they're offering. And like you say, when they're not competing strong, not anymore, not after last weekend, they're not so much pushing for the European places. So yeah, I agree with you. They may well have wanted to take him. That they only cost about 5 million, didn't he, when he signed? Incredible size. So yeah, of course they probably would. But if the player doesn't want to go, the player doesn't want to go, which of course is another factor. In all of these things, we say, why didn't Forest move for this player or that player? Often they might look at Forest and say, well, I don't think I'm going to get in that team. Although I would say I think they're an incredibly attractive club to join because of the football they're playing and the obvious atmosphere around the place, the fans, the stadium, everything about that is incredibly a very attractive option. But if you're thinking of a loan, particularly, and think, well, I'm not going to get into that team, then it's probably best for all parties that you don't join.
Last other point from John's article I just wanted to mention is the talk of a new deal for Nuno. The team are currently in Dubai on like a winter camp that the owners paid for, which is great. Nuno feels like he's got everything he wants now, hasn't he? He's not, obviously it's Marinakis' club, but in sort of an Emery way. Nuno's got his tight squad. He feels like he gets what he wants in terms of recruitment, which is great. It would make sense for him to sign a new contract, even though there's no cast iron guarantees. Do you think new contracts are probably at the top of the agenda as well when we talk about Nuno, Aina, Gibbs-White, Callum Hudson-Odoi? There's a lot of stuff to be done as well, even beyond transfers, isn't there?
Yeah, and don't forget that will cost money as well. This isn't just adding 2 or 3 years onto their current terms. The situation's changed. These players have got Forest up to where they are and have had a brilliant time. And you think of a player, take Hudson-Odoi, he's signed for a few million quid, and he's been playing really well. Actually, if Forest were to sell him, he's actually worth way more than that now. So will cost a huge amount more in wages. He's probably on decent money anyway, having obviously been at Chelsea. But, you think of Elanga, signed for 15 million. Well, they're turning down 50, 60 million or whatever it was from Newcastle at the end of the summer. So again, their value has gone up, so their wages are going up. So if you're thinking that Forest aren't investing by spending money, it will be costing them to keep this set of young players together for the next few years. So I do think that's a priority. And, you think when Nuno first arrived, it was a 2.5-year deal, wasn't it? He signed, so he's only now got a year and a half left on that. You wouldn't really want it to get to the summer, would you? It'd be better if it was agreed before then, because otherwise it gets to the summer and there's a year left and it becomes a talking point and people wonder. And then if it's not done by the time the season starts, it can all just be a bit disruptive and a bit of, Nuno, I'm sure, wouldn't be wanting questions in press conferences through August and September. What about your contract? What about your contract? He doesn't want it to be about him ever. So probably better if that is just dealt with quietly behind the scenes, well in advance of the summer. Get that done, get a longer term deal for him, and then he stops being part of the conversation in that sense, which is how he wants it. And all the talk can get back to what a brilliant job the players are doing.
I've got a couple of charity plugs that I'll do at the end. Before we move on to the end, final thoughts and the chance for you to plug your stuff, David. Anything else you want to say about the transfer window or anything else Forest related? We haven't touched on the Brighton games. We discussed that a lot. Any general stuff on Forest before we move on?
The one thing I will just say is Steve Hodge, when he's with us on commentary, just keeps saying to me, enjoy the ride. Just says, enjoy the ride. Just enjoy the ride. Every time I try to ask him about hopes of European competition or anything else, he just concentrate on the next game. Enjoy the ride. I'm enjoying the ride. And I think it's a really good message at the moment because it's a lot of fun following Forest at the moment. And it hasn't always been, has it? It hasn't. It's been miserable. We've all, some of us have been, at the City Ground when there's been 15, 16,000, the games have been miserable. There have been players wearing the shirt that you just watch and go, what? There's no sort of passion there. Do you remember Joe Worrell's speech after a game a few years back saying some of these players don't care as much as they should, and paraphrasing, but that was kind of the insinuation. And you look now, you watch that game at the weekend, every single player, the subs, the unused subs, everybody is so engaged in what Forest are at the moment that you've just got to enjoy it. And I think don't get hung up on things that don't matter that much. Just enjoy it. Like that 1-0, that one defeat at Bournemouth. Yeah, it was a shock and everything, but how brilliant that the Forest fans right at the start of the next game weren't those sort of supporters that go, well, come on then, just entertain me then, put that right from last week. It wasn't that. It was, come on, then off we go again. Let's enjoy it. And it's brilliant. The fans are doing this. This isn't a call to action. Fans are doing this. But just let's keep doing that. It's so much fun, and we really need to remember that it hasn't always been like this.
Let me tell you what's coming up then, because I'll continue my transfer raid of the BBC, as David mentioned there. Brian Laws will be on recording Friday, so probably be out Friday or Saturday with his thoughts on everything. He's not been doing many games. He's had surgery on his knee or something, hasn't he? I think so. He's not been around much, has he?
Yeah, we're falling apart because I had surgery on my shoulder the other week, so I've had 2 weeks off. He's off for a bit. So when I say it's been fun this season, we've also kind of been clogging up hospital beds as well. But yeah, he'll be back. I've been texting him. He's in decent spirits, Lawsy. So he'll be good. He's always good value, Lawsy.
Certainly is. So Brian will be on later in the week. Tomorrow we'll be with Jason Pine, who covers football in New Zealand. So we'll hear more about Tyler Bindon then, and then we'll have an Exeter preview as well, perhaps on Thursday or Friday. If we keep forgetting that game's on Tuesday, which is ridiculous as well. We'll discuss how ridiculous it is that the FA Cup is now spread over a month or something, basically. It's a bit mad. A couple of quick charity plugs then while I've got your attention. You might remember Paul Lindsay, who's a big Forest fan, known as the Hiking Ginger. I'll post a link in the description for a nice little YouTube video of him and his dad. He's raising money for the Alzheimer's Society. So if you click on that and you feel you've got a couple of quid to spare to donate to him, that'd be great. And also another Forest fan, Ross Levy, is running the London Marathon He's fundraising for Autism East Midlands. His brother is an autistic adult, has benefited from the work for this charity. So do check them out if you want to click on that and make a donation. And also, Lewis McGugan gave us 2 hours of his time last night, and I didn't plug his Eastwood Academy trial. So I'll just do it again if anyone's missed it. If you're in year 11 or relatives in year 11 and you want to stay in football and combine it with education, Eastwood are having trials in February. I'll put the link in the description for Lewis's email address if you want to register an interest, but it's to study BTEC Level 3 in sports and coaching, with Lewis leading the program with other very highly qualified coaches. Right. David, feel free to give us a plug for anything you want to plug on the radio, your podcast, anything else?
Colin Frey and I will discuss January on the Shut Up and Show More Football podcast in a couple of days' time. And also, I'll be talking to Colin about the fact that the last 7-0 league win for Forest was the day he made his debut on BBC Radio Nottingham, April 1991. His first game was Forest 7, Chelsea 0. When you might remember Lloyd Keane and Gary Crosby and Nigel Clough and Stuart Pearce just absolutely ripped Chelsea apart. That was his first ever game commentating. He was a Forest fan, but he must have just thought, well, it's easy this. And he's had to wait 34 years for it to happen again. We'll be talking a bit about that and how he feels January is gone. He predicted it'd be quiet, and he was right. Of course he was. It's Colin. So that will be out Thursday, I think.
You boys must have been fuming when that Exeter game was put on a Tuesday night.
Well, especially as it's my youngest daughter's birthday, so that's so fuming for various reasons, really. But I mean, it's just the way it is. And also, from our point of view, we've then got Notts County playing on a Thursday night, 2 days after
Have
that.
you?
Yeah, Notts
In the
County.
league?
We're at Port Vale. They do some games on Thursdays now. So purely in terms of logistics, we've got Mansfield playing on a Friday night this week, Notts County on a Thursday night next week. From a radio point of view of trying to find some time to actually put programs together and then, be on the radio for them, it's a logistical challenge, I would say, just at the moment, and it's only going to get, more and more mad, isn't it? We had one the other week where we had, I think it was Notts playing at 12:30, Forest at 3, and Mansfield at 6, all on the same day. And it's modern football. It's the way it is, and there's a joy to it as well that you get so much football in one day, and it can be a lot of fun. But in terms of actually trying to stay on air for that long, it's not the easiest. You just eat loads of biscuits, keep your energy up.
Yeah, not healthy. No. There's a whole episode to be done around football scheduling. I think it's the way it's done, especially if you're in this country and you can't watch a 3 p.m. game and all that stuff. We might get onto that. Did Mansfield sign Jordan Rhodes? Did I read that?
Yeah, they did.
The scourge of Forest.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, all those goals he scored for Sheffield Wednesday, and he's everywhere he's gone, he's scored goals, really, hasn't he? I think pretty much, and he's generally been around the Championship for all that time. So. A very Nigel Clough signing, I'd say. Nigel Clough tends, especially I think in this window, tends to want to sign your more experienced players who he feels can just come in, they know what their job is, they can get in and do it. And I think they would have had a quieter window had they not played quite so poorly in the last couple of games. They've basically played I think they played the bottom 3 in their last 3 games and lost to all of them. They lost 5 games in a row in all comps, and then after the game the other week, and an interview on Radio Nottingham after the game, Jake Garner asked him, he said, is it going to be a quiet one? Well, it was going to be, but not anymore, basically. So they went out and signed a couple of players. But I mean, that's a heck of a signing, I think, for a club in mid-table in League One to sign somebody with the calibre of Jordan Rhodes. I think that's potentially an exciting signing. We'll see how he goes. I mean, they've got Lee Gregory in there, who's been scoring goals as well already this season, of course. So plenty of experience they've got now in attack, and plenty of goals in it, you'd think.
Yeah, it's good business. I see they've been on the slide. Obviously, you follow them. So Notts County signed a good player as well, by the look of it, from
May Traore from Fredrikstad in Norway. And it's interesting, I think, talk about the expectation on him, because they signed Alassane Jatta last year, who was a a West African-born striker playing in Scandinavia, and has then gone and scored 20 goals over the last 12 months. Have been absolutely brilliant. And now the owners have signed another West African-born striker from Northwest African from Guinea, who's been playing in Norway and scoring goals, and again mid-20s. And look, it worked for them last year, and obviously they've got good contacts up in Scandinavia, so that's another interesting signing for them. We'll see how May Traore does. I think when he signed, people thought that might mean that Jatta was going, because there's been a lot of interest in Jatta. Plymouth particularly talked about, but yeah, they were in a position where they were able to ask for a huge amount of money, and nobody stumped up. So they've kept him, and they've got now, I would say, a very, very good chance of going up.
Yeah, we will end now. I know we're dragging on. I always drag on and go off tangents, but I do see Notts fans on Twitter and Facebook not having the manager. I find that a bit weird, because I know Maynard have got off to an awful start, but they're third in League One. I was just looking.
Yes, well, there was a point, was it about November time or something, where it's very easy in that division to slip quite a few places in the league, because it's so ridiculously tight from second down. And they basically had a few results where suddenly they'd basically dropped from top at one point to about 10th or 11th. And I think fans just thought, well, then looked at it and went, hang on a minute. If you look through the first few months, they dropped from 6th to end of the season, kind of lower mid-table. And then the start of this season, apart from a run of 4 wins in a row, then they were going, well, we're back to mid-table again. This isn't good enough. But since then, and I may get the stats wrong, I think it's 7 wins in 9. I think it's 7 wins and 1 draw out of their last 9. And the 1 defeat is to Walsall, who are top. So you now look at it and go, well, they've absolutely turned that round, and they're flying now. They've kept hold of their star striker. They've signed another forward. So I think now they are in a position to absolutely go up. But it's so tight that it just depends when the league ends, if you see what I mean, because they all just kind of win a couple, lose one, win a couple, lose one, and go on a bad run. And it's extraordinary. It really is. That division's bizarre at the top. The other day, Notts were second, but if they lost, they could have ended the day 7th. And that's crazy. So that's the reason, really. I think a bit of frustration towards him at points. But they're flying again. So they've got a good chance now.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of them. I just see clips. So I don't see the games. They score some amazing goals, and they can see some absolute howlers whenever I watch them. That youth from Spurs scores some wonder goals, and McGoldrick as well.
He is McGoldrick's just showing his class. He's just better than the level. McGoldrick. You watch him. He pops a ball over the pitch. He just takes the ball off the opponent so casually. Things a pass. He can just casually find a space 25 yards out and curl it into the top corner. And George Abbott, he says, on loan from Spurs. He's a heck of a player. I saw him make his debut against Gillingham, and you saw right from the start that he is very comfortable in control of the ball, knows where other players are, very prepared to make a short pass, happy to make a long pass, but didn't try and do anything silly, didn't try to go over the top. I like him a lot. And then, as you say, he started scoring some brilliant goals. The one at Accrington the other week on a half volley, steaming in from a deep corner, that was just class. Yeah, he'll end up playing in the Premier League at some point. I don't doubt. He looks a very, 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 very talented player.
Right, we
became Notts focused there, didn't we? Sorry.
Yeah, I was saying such a tangent.
You should branch out.
Talked about the wrong football club for 10 minutes there, almost at the end. So appreciate everyone's patience. If you've enjoyed the first probably 40 minutes of this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, do consider channel membership or Patreon, or any good reviews on Spotify or iTunes, and forest-focus.co.uk if you want to buy any merch. Someone bought a mug today. And the profit, I don't mind saying to people, the profit margins are pretty small on this. It's not really about it. But when I got the report, it said it cost me money to actually ship the mug. I don't make any money. I'm a net loss for this one mug randomly. So
I think we now know who the mug is, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, brilliant. Oh, nice. Very, very good. Very good. Yeah. So do audio merch from there, and hopefully it won't cost me money. That's the first time that's happened. But it was a bit dispiriting to see that I was £1.38 down on a mug. Right. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day. If we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.